get to this man right here. You're going to kick us off.
All right, Vivek, I watched the last debate, and I saw your interview with Tucker, and it was awesome. I think that the post-debate interviews and things tried to portray you as some naive interventionist or isolationist. And, I wanted you to dispel that for all these people here, that you're going to do what it takes to defend American interests and American allies. And I have one other question. There's a lot of people here that are faith-based people, and I know that you're not a Christian, but I know that you support all the faith-based values that we all value too. I want you to speak to that stuff.
Yeah, just the easy questions, you know.
Softball.
Kick off the nose. That's good. There's a lot there. So let me address the second one first, actually. And I'm so grateful you asked this, because sometimes I feel like it's an elephant in the room. It doesn't have to be, right? We should talk in the open. So I'm Hindu. And I'll always be honest with you about who we are and what we stand for. And so I'll tell you about the values I was raised in, my faith. I believe there's one true God. I believe that God put us here for a purpose. I believe that He works through us, and that we have a moral duty to realize that purpose. We're His instruments. We don't get to choose who God works through. God chooses who God works through. And I believe that we're all equal. This is the heart of my faith, that we're all equal because God resides in each of us. I was actually raised in a pretty traditional family. Like many people go through their 20s, wouldn't have considered myself religious for much of my 20s. I came back to it later, though. But I was raised in a very traditional household. Believed that family is the foundation, that marriage is sacred. The household I was raised in, the same value set. Very traditional. Marriage between a man and a woman. Divorce is not an option or a preference that you just opt for. That you have to make a sacrifice for the good things in life. That, you know what? The good things in life often involve a trade-off, because it's not just about life on this earth, it's about eternal life. Now, are those foreign values? Thank you. Are those foreign values? Are those really strange values? If you look around much of the country, actually, I think they are today. You turn on the TV, go to a movie theater, go to corporate DEI training session. You go to, even much of what they're teaching in K through 12 education or universities. It might seem like foreign values, but they're not foreign values to most of us in this country. They haven't been foreign for most of our national history. So, just to put it on the table, can I spread Christianity through this country? I wouldn't be the best person to do that. And I don't think that's something it's not really the president's job either. But will I stand for those shared values, which are the same as the Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on? You're darn right I will. And I have a special responsibility to do it. So that's what I'll do. And now we got that easy one out of the way. We'll go to the other easy question, just like this broad foreign policy. I'll take some other questions too to mix it in. Especially, if somebody next has a question on my foreign policy, keep your hand up and I'll come to you next, and then we'll come back for other ones. But I'll begin to answer. It feels like they use the terms to silence debate. And I got this. I wrote the book Woke Inc. a few years ago, which is criticizing the spread of wokeness through corporate America. And the left would say, racist. Do I look like a white supremacist to you? It's interesting. And it's a racist for being against the anti-racist agenda, which is really just racism in clothing. But I used to criticize the left for this because they're just using it to silence debate. But now, in the right, my view is we have to look at every conflict through the prism of what advances the American interest, period. And that means standing up with the spine. If you hit us, hit our sons and daughters somewhere, if you hit American troops, we're going to hit you back 10 times harder, right? So I'm not going to be pussyfooting around, right? We're going to stand for our interests, but it's for the American interests, right? So if I'm talking to Bibi, I'll give him a clear message. You want to smoke those terrorists on your southern border, you have the right to do it. Go ahead, and you have a diplomatic dome and our iron dome and our blessing to do it. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to smoke the terrorists on our southern border in this country, because my moral duty as your next president. Who's that? Oh, it sounded familiar to me. So I thought my son's going to sleep, but it sounds a lot. How old is she? 10 months. My guy's 16 months. I was like, he made it in here? It sounded very familiar. But actually, I'll bring this up. Actually, I was going to say something else, but my moral duty as a father is to my family and to my 2 sons, period. I won't make any bones about that. My moral duty as your next president is to you, the citizens of this country, not any other one. So that means we got to think for the long run, absolutely. We will always stand for our interests. Pull apart the Russia-China alliance. Nobody's talking about that. We're closer to World War III than we've ever been. We're dependent on our actual biggest enemy, China, for our modern way of life. How about fixing that? But that's my foreign policy. Avoid World War III, declare independence from China, and then secure our own homeland where we're as vulnerable as we've ever been. That's not isolationism. That's George Washington's vision for standing for American interests. So stay on foreign policy. We'll come here and then we'll go to other topics after that. Did you have one on foreign policy?
I do not. It's about investment and fiduciary responsibility.
All right, that's too important of a topic for me to skip. Do it. We'll come to you after that, man.
So first of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't start by saying thank you for being here and thank you for what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
But my real question involves the difference. If you can explain in layman's terms the difference between stakeholder capitalism and shareholder capitalism and the latter's relation to ESG scores and ultimately why it's detrimental.
I appreciate it, man. So, are you in school around here, or what do you?
I've graduated.
You graduated?
It's a conversation I was having with my father today, and I
like
should
it.
explain.
See, this is my kind of bar conversation. Stakeholders. I like it. I'm that way. I'm that way, actually. I love that. So this is actually really important, though. See, so I have a general rule of thumb. The more boring it sounds, the more you have to pay attention. Because the people who named it, especially if it's an acronym, ESG, DEI, CBDC, the more it sounds like it's boring you, the more you pay attention. So this was really important. I wrote my first book about it, and I wrote my third book about it, too. It was so important, I couldn't do it in one. So the classical view of American capitalism is that the job of a company is to provide products and services to a customer for the purpose of maximizing profit without apologizing for it. That's the job of a company. And then there's jobs of other institutions, nonprofit institutions, universities, to take care of other societal issues. That was supplanted by a more modern view of what you call stakeholder capitalism, which is the job of businesses not just to look after their own products and services for their customers and make a profit doing so, but also solve all the other world's problems while they're at it. Racial equity, climate change. You have to take all of that into account as a business leader. Now, Milton Friedman, he was a critic of this years ago. I respect a lot of what the man had to say because he said this would make companies less effective at making widgets or making whatever they make. And then that leaves all of us poorer as a consequence. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I agree with him. My criticism is the opposite. It's that when companies, be it Silicon Valley kings or banks or Wall Street institutions, decide or are empowered by the government to take on what was supposedly the responsibilities of a constitutional republic, that's actually a form of monarchy. And so that's what we've seen playing out in the country. In the name of looking after stakeholders, you have social media companies censoring speech through the back door that the government couldn't censor directly. You have your own money, without your knowledge, by the way, being used through your 401k account to vote in corporate America's boardrooms for climate change policies or racial equity audits. And I'm not making this up. Scope 3 emissions cap at Chevron, that's one. Racial equity audit at Apple, that's another. And most of you, I'm almost certain most of your money was used to vote for these policies in the last 2 to 3 years. And I'm certain that most of you didn't know it. And so that's a scam. It's called, they put 3-letter acronyms, ESG, to make it sound fancy, environmental, social, and governance agendas, but that's what's going on. So I believe in solving problems. I was really reluctantly pulled into this little thing we're doing to running for president now. I was trying to do it in other ways, right? I wrote a book. Nobody paid attention. Wrote a second book. Well, people started to pay attention. Then I started a company, Strive, to compete directly with BlackRock, one of the biggest perpetrators of this ESG stakeholder capitalism nonsense. And so we'll offer the same kinds of investment products, but we won't vote the shares for these woke agendas. We'll vote for products and services for profit, which is what people want from their investment account, maximizing overall value. But the problem is a lot of these problems originate with the government itself. Right? So what the government's doing is they can't pass the Green New Deal through the front door, they'll get a bank to do it through the back door. That's what John Kerry's doing. Can't censor speech through the front door, threatens some companies in Silicon Valley to take it down instead. And that's the real threat to liberty we face today. It's not just big government anymore. That's why it's going to take someone from the next generation. It's not 1980 anymore. It's a new hybrid of state power and corporate power that together are more powerful than either one alone. That's what Mussolini called fascism. That's what I call in modern parlance the woke industrial complex. It's a leviathan, it's a monster far more powerful than either one alone. That's the kind of threat that we face today. And then there's a dimension of this where China gets in on the act, and then it goes real south, but there's so many other questions, and maybe I'll weave that into one of my other responses. Great question. Proud of you for asking it, because we got to scratch beneath the surface of the usual talking points and get to actually what the hell's going on. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, what I've been seeing in the last couple of
And then we'll come to you.
that I've been able to vote for, one of my concerns is I've seen just the incoming president going from taking a bunch of executive orders.
Yeah,
Just
executive orders. That's a good question.
constantly do that. So what's your position on that? And would you do a bunch of executive orders to repeal what Biden did, or are we going to keep going?
Yeah, so here's what my executive orders look like, because I don't like the game of ping pong here that we're playing. I bring a Sharpie marker, cross them out one by one, okay? Executive order, I talked about affirmative action earlier, right? And I just want you guys to know some of this stuff for me isn't just a bunch of slogans. We have a clear, a very specific plan and vision for exactly how we're going to do it. Well, I said about affirmative action, race-based quotas. How? Actually relates to this question. You know how that came to be? It was an executive order. The number was 11246. It was passed under Lyndon Johnson. Never by Congress, just by executive action, said that if you're a contractor of the government, this includes 20% of the U.S. workforce working for such a company, then you have to adopt these toxic racial and gender quota systems. Never passed through Congress. Great. We take a pen and we cross it out. Any of the unconstitutional regulations relating to reporting carbon emissions by mandate or otherwise, we're done with it. Cross it out. Much of the climate change agenda is based on false premises. The government should not reinforce that through these mandates. So that's the way I would do it. So is that executive action? Yeah, it is, but it's executive action that rescinds prior unconstitutional regulations. And so any regulation that Congress did not actually authorize, in my view, and in the current Supreme Court's view, is unconstitutional. So when I swear an oath to the Constitution, that's how we keep it. And I want this to really land with people. And I love that we're getting some academic, some deep questions tonight. This is good. This encourages me. When you guys are asking questions that are better than the media, this is strong. It's good. I'm serious. That literally means a majority, like way over 50% of the current federal regulations are unconstitutional right now. So this isn't like some incremental academic change. This is a seismic change. We get back to 5% GDP growth in this country with this one. All I got to do is swear an oath to the Constitution and actually keep it. And that's how I'm going to lead. Thank you. Great question. We'll come to this gentleman here.
Election integrity. I was going through Wisconsin, picked up a little paper here in the middle of Wisconsin, and it said 2.8 million ineligible voters on the list. How would you become president, or any of the other Republicans become president? I mean, they said there's another, I'm sorry.
It's bad.
It's very bad. There is 4 million adults in Wisconsin, okay? And this means that there's 2.8 million that are not voters on the registration list.
It's like 2.88 million. Sounds about right. So
how would you get elected, or how would?
So the question: how are we going to win this thing if we're playing a crooked playing field, right?
Exactly.
So here's the answer. I mean, I told you what we're going to do, right? Single-day voting, national holiday, paper ballots, government-issued ID to match the voter file. By the way, I think English should be the national language and the only language allowed in the ballots. That's another thing. It's a basic thing. Just know the language that you're voting for. At least know the Constitution. I personally think that every high school senior who graduates from high school should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass to become a voting citizen of this country. This is not too much to ask. And for those who say that's too much to ask, earlier event as part of our tour yesterday. We had 6 events yesterday. This is our 6th event today. Young woman, young girl. She's 10 years old. She comes in. She's heard me say this. Another event that we did with a packet, 100 questions. She got 100 out of 100. Passing score 60%. 10-year-old girl in Iowa can do it. Anybody can do it as well. So those are the basic backdrop acts. But we got to win to do it. Right? So how are we going to do that? It sounds about as ridiculous for me to say as it would have for Reagan in November of '79. I think we actually have an opportunity to win this in a landslide like Reagan did in 1980. The difference between 50.1 doesn't do the job, guys. And there's a certain person where they're not going to let him do it. I mean, it's really sad. Whatever it takes, the system has decided. It's like an immune response. But I think that I'm going to be able to do this with fresh legs as an outsider. A landslide minus some shenanigans is still a landslide. And you know what the difference is? Young people. We're reaching young people at a scale nobody in the Republican Party has in a very long time. Going to college campuses, 40% of our donors, 150,000 some odd donors, are first-time ever donors to the GOP. That's unheard of. It's normally 2%. So we got to win, not just by a little bit, but we got to win big. It's like my analogy with the media. They'll say that don't show up because they're not treating Republicans fairly. Well, we can't retreat. I'll show up with Don Lemon. He made him lose his mind. Bye-bye. We're done. So we show up on the other side's turf and we win. It's the only game we've got. So we've got broken rails. I'm the freight train. We run through anything standing between us, then we come back and we lay the proper rails. That's the only answer we have, and I appreciate it. We'll come to you right here, and then we'll go back to some